Hello, everyone. My name is Ignacio Fernandez. I'm Senior Policy Advisor for the Climate Registry. Um, we are a carbon disclosure organization that provides guidance to organizations, companies, academic institutions on how to provide more clear and transparent information on their emissions. In addition, we organize commissions and events throughout the year, including the COPs, where we have members. We're not having. Okay, can you guys hear it? Okay. We have members attending the COP and other events, and in this instance, we wanted to explore traditions and practices from first tribes from throughout the world that have been historically undermined or undervalued. So we invited members of first tribes from many parts of the world, and organizations that are working with coalitions of first tribes. For them to share their experience on environmental and climate practices that, again, interestingly enough, have been resurfaced or revived instead of the most traditional, more colonialistic, might be a little bit too charged term, but traditional Western views on how to address climate issues. So in this session, we're gonna have the members of this panel to share their experiences, not just with projects, but with policies, how to address, how to connect between different organizations, different governance from the first tribes with local, federal, states, depending on the country that they are. We will also explore ways to link indigenous leadership with global climate action networks. More and more we see in the different COPs, as we have danced, more indigenous groups have gained a lot of strength by linking with each other and expressing and showing their views, and it's time for the rest of the world to start paying attention, because we're noticing that their approach might be the correct one, or at least we need to take into consideration. So having said that, in one last minute change, you will see that Macarena Marowski is listed. She's feeling a little bit under the weather, so her colleague Yobel is going to replace her. We're going to make the change in a few minutes, but I'll have Yobel introducing himself and introducing the rest of the panel. Yobel, thank you.
Thank you, Ignacio. Can everyone hear me well? So we can really have a good conversation. So thank you, Ignacio, for inviting me as the moderator. I'm very excited to be here. I'm Yobel. I'm from Indonesia. My organization is Global Alliance for Incinerator Alternatives. I'm working on the waste issue, but also on environmental justice. And we do see a lot of solutions are actually often from traditional and also indigenous people's practice. So I'm excited to hear from all of the panelists here on what is this thing. So we only have an hour, so we can have a snappy conversation. And we have a question for everyone here. And we'll start with the women's first. So the question for everyone, just in like 1 minute or two, you're leading with your own solutions. Could you share, each of you, one traditional practice or community-based approach on how you're doing environmental care and ensure climate resilience in your work? So I'll pass it first to Christina. So I'll go, yeah, you can share and then we can pass it to the other person. Just a quick thing.
Okay, I'll just intro myself. Chimai, Christina Snyder Watoashiao. Hi everybody, I'm Christina Snyder Ashtari. I'm a member of the Dry Creek Rancheria Band of Pomo Indians, and I'm Mihila Kauna and Makamo. That means people of the Westwater and people of the Salmon Hole. My tribe is located in Sonoma County, California, so just if you look at a map, they'll say it's Northern California. It's pretty much in the middle of the state on the coast. I currently serve as the Governor's Tribal Affairs Secretary in California. And what I do in that role is I work with our 109 federally recognized tribes, all of our native populations, and our international relationships with indigenous peoples as well. And in California, the one thing I want to highlight, because I know you gave 1 minute, so I have 10 seconds to tell you, one of the things that we do throughout the state is cultural burning practices, which are these seasonal burning practices that we do for forest health to maintain species. And it's something that we've done since time immemorial. In order to respond to the changes of our seasons and make sure that we have an abundant acorn harvest. So it's something that in my role, we have been looking at some of the laws that the state has passed to prevent these practices from happening, and we've been disentangling those laws to allow for a more abundant acorn harvest, healthier species in the forest, and by utilizing these low-grade burns that are culturally informed so that we're avoiding sacred species, sacred sites, we are preventing these large-scale wildfires. And you might have seen there's a big article that came out up in Karuk tribe where their utilization of these practices actually this year was demonstrated to prevent large-scale wildfire that they actually see on an annual basis. So that's one of the highlights, and I'll pass it along.
Thank you. Well, we can have a bit more time, but yes, just to make sure everyone gets the time to share there, because we have another questions coming for everyone. But yes, let's have the same question to Francisca. So Francisca, what's your practice? You can also introduce yourself and then share your practice.
Oi, então eu sou a Francisca, sou do povo Arara, do Acre, Brasil. O Acre tem uma experiência muito boa, seja na políticas públicas ou dos territórios mesmo, né, as nossas práticas. No Brasil nós temos terra demarcada. É demarcada, não é um lote, mas é demarcada que nós temos a política de gestão territorial e ambiental. Dentro do Acre são 36 terras indígenas. Essas 36 terras indígenas têm os seus planos de gestão territorial e nós temos uma categoria dos agentes agroflorestais que trabalha a educação ambiental, cuidando das nascentes dos rios, do sistema agroflorestal, do reaproveitamento de água, de captação de água da chuva, do controle do fogo, com as nossas práticas. É claro que as nossas práticas hoje não servem para apagar esse incêndio grande que está acontecendo no mundo. Então, nós temos uma governança muito participativa, nós temos uma lei que respeita as políticas, os programas e projetos que não venham violar os nossos direitos e que faça a política junto com nós e que os apoios cheguem para apoiar o que nós já fazemos na prática.
Yeah, and then we can have interpretation.
Not necessarily interpretation, but I'm going to summarize what Francisca shared with us. She is Francisca from the Arara tribe in Acre, in the state of Acre in Brazil. She is the Secretary for Indigenous Affairs. And she shared with us some important points for indigenous tribes in Brazil. First of all, the land is delimited, so and in each land, in each territory, indigenous territory, it was developed a plan for environmental and territorial management. So this is the main instrument that guide the actions and the activities into the territory. And in addition, the important regulatory framework was built to implement a specific platform of governance. So one of the most important issues in the state of Acre is the governance platform involving several key players that make it possible the development or the implementations of the plans in the indigenous territories. Sobre o fogo, combate ao fogo.
Sobre o fogo, nós temos as nossas práticas tradicional, né, que nós já praticava antes, porque nós produzia só para o alimento, a gente não produzia para alta escala. Então, nós temos a nossa técnica, os conhecimentos tradicional, mas hoje, com o aquecimento global, isso tem afetado a questão do fogo e nós precisamos de tecnologia, nós precisamos de formação, porque esse fogo de hoje, as nossas práticas já não é suficiente para combater, porque antes era diferente. Hoje, os incêndios estão muito grandes, né? Estão chegando com mais velocidade, muitas vezes pelos vizinhos e pela questão mesmo da quintura que aumentou muito mais. Então, aquele controle que nós tínhamos dos conhecimentos tradicionais que assoviava para encontrar o fogo, para não se espalhar, isso não serve mais para hoje. Então, nós precisamos de tecnologia que venha agregar com nossos conhecimentos para a gente combater os incêndios, até porque nós não fazemos grandes queimadas, né? Os nossos territórios é uma barreira para enfrentar, para diminuir as queimadas e o desmatamento.
They are facing two main challenges now. The first one is related to the scale of production. So now indigenous groups are producing more in their territories, so this is a new issue. And in addition, climate change is affecting also indigenous territories. So it's becoming more dry, so fires became or huge easily. So it seems that what they conclude is that traditional knowledge is not enough to deal with this new challenge. So now they are dealing with the need of technology and to develop new actions, procedures, and platforms and planning to deal with forest fires.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Francisca. So we'll have Janelle to share her experience and practices that you have in the region.
Thank you, Zanhunzu, Spuzi, Janelle, Stella Ten, Luxuyu Baflasta. My name is Janella Point. I am from Stella Ten, which is a small nation located in the north central part of British Columbia, Canada. I sit with the Caribou clan. My community is very small, and Stella means people of the Cape. We've been put on a reserve located on the cape of one of the lakes, but we're part of a larger people called Dakath, which means people of the water, and that people is part of a larger people called Yinka Dene, which means people of the land. So my people would have traditionally been nomadic people who moved with the seasons over a vast amount of territory. In fact, you can find people from our language group all the way up in the Northwest Territories of so-called Canada, down to the Navajo Nation in so-called United States. So we're facing a new challenge where not only are we on the front lines of the climate crisis, but we're for the first time in this long history, as people, we're stationary. And the place that we've been put by the government is, I would say, the most unideal part of land, because we've been put on a floodplain in a village that would have only been temporarily used as a fishing site. And the forest that surrounds our people has been severely altered by the logging industry. So we don't really have any intact forest ecosystems. Most of the forests near our community are planted forests by the logging industry for timber. Which means that when forest fires happen, which happen on a regular basis in so-called Canada, the forest lights up like a tinderbox. So our community is often on evacuation alert in the summer, and so we've also started prescribing cultural burns, which is something that the government has disallowed for many years, and is now starting to be a part of firefighting programs, not just in my community, but across the entire country, because they're realizing it's a crucial part of fire management. But I will say that no singular small practice is enough to really keep our community safe for practice. And so I would say the most important thing we're doing is, one, reclaiming our language and reintroducing our traditional governance system our traditional governance system, we had hereditary chiefs who were a part of a pocket of each land on our territory, and you were only considered a good chief if your territory had not only enough for your people, but enough to share with other clans. So our governance structure really is about the health of our ecosystem and our health of our people, which is really counter to the system that is imposed. And because our community is now stationary and much smaller than we would have been due to diseases brought in our community, this is like a really crucial part of waking up our culture and giving an opportunity for the young ones to learn practices through our governance system instead of teaching it through the Western lens.
Thanks, Chanel. I think it's really important that you highlight it's not only one solutions. There's plenty, and I think also heard like governance, like indigenous governance, is also important. So let's move on to Damir. Like, what's your view? What's your experience? Can you share it with us?
Hey, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm Damir. I'm from Chile. I myself, I have not indigenous lineage, as far as I know, in my close lineage. So I will speak from my experience. I am part of a community, of an indigenous community in southern Chile, which is a Mapuche community, so Mapuche Huilliche. And what we do, I study environmental sciences. I'm still in my undergraduate. And what we do, it's we link youth, indigenous and non-indigenous youth, with indigenous elders from these Huilliche people, which live in an archipelago in southern Chile. And what's happening there in Chiloé, which is the archipelago, we're facing this issue regarding socio-environmental, transition, and energetic transition. So there are these wind turbines who install themselves for energetic production, clean energy, but they install themselves in the top of the mountains where they have this ecosystem, which is like a peatland, a bogland, I think is the name, which retains all the water, which rains in the winter, and in the summer where it doesn't rain, it releases it for the rivers to flow. And they are being installed in the top of the mountains. So they're taking out this peatland, and we already have places in Chiloé where there is no water, in a place where it paradoxically rains as much as the Amazon rainforest. So people is getting water supplies through trucks, and they're fighting for the right for the water. So what we do in this link between youth and indigenous elders, we're trying to teach these indigenous traditional governance systems to the young professionals who are being formed, and also to democratize what we learn in the universities, right? So we go there, we go to the territories, and we stay there for a week, and we go there to plant trees, to do all these nature-based solutions, restore lagoons, and so on. And in the meantime, we also learn from the culture. We also learn from other ways of relating to nature, relating to ourselves and with ourselves. So it's a way of working. We've came to understand that working with the land is also a work you do with yourself. So in this work of entering, understanding this other culture, it really shifted our reality, because all of us were people from the cities. And it's very beautiful because many young people have came to acknowledge their ancestry, so their lineage, indigenous lineage, and many of them already started to learn the language and recover the culture. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Damir. I think we'll get back on how the youth, younger generation of indigenous lineage can really bring in the knowledge into the mainstream and then implement it. As you said, there's a lot of examples that you've given, but we'll get back to you on that. So last for the first round, we have Tubagus from Indonesia. So Tubagus, please share with us the stories from Indonesia.
Thank you for the opportunity for insight sharing on how indigenous people and local community in Indonesia responding in climate crisis. As an archipelagic country, Indonesia has a large indigenous population of indigenous people. Indigenous Alliance Indonesia estimate we have 40 until 70 million of indigenous people in Indonesia. Currently, we not only is very long for advocating on indigenous people and local community in Indonesia. Not only about advocating on they get access to territory, get to right to food, right to terry, and right to everything. Yeah, as a smaller group, Indigenous people often face still facing unfair treatment in Indonesia, negative label, violence, threats, and being treated like criminal. The meaning of who counts as an indigenous people is sometimes still unclear on wrong. We have like a big debatable of who indigenous people in Indonesia because we have 17,000 island and different every island they have like the local meaning, local terminology about indigenous people in Indonesia. We identify several reasons why IPLC in Indonesia received unfair treatment and was not designed as the main actor by the government, including the cultural identity, value system and knowledge, territory, law, and institution, which often lack clear rules in regulation and government policies. Currently, our efforts we have like it's not a big step, but we try with another CISO Indonesia. We have alliance. We try to advocacy in indigenous people. We try to another step our effort with IPC to protect forest and biodiversity to have reached the stage of strengthening and developing the economy, because this the key of how to indigenous people can survive from anything. Until now, indigenous people in Indonesia, they still not have law to recognize not only their territory but also their identity, because when we call the indigenous people in Indonesia, so they need identity. Forest is identity or address indigenous people in Indonesia. So when they lost the forest, so they lost identity as well. So we're trying to make the approach, another approach for advocacy in indigenous people. So in 2021, while he launched the, so try to translate or
No, we have a second round of question for the details on the challenges, but I think you have mentioned a lot about the challenges that identity and land is one, right? But the the mainstream regulation does not acknowledge that or include that. That creates exclusion or displacement for the indigenous people. And you mentioned that one of your strategy is to build alliances, right?
Yeah.
Which we can get back to on the second round of question. So that's our first round. Thank you to Bagus. We'll have a second round of questions for everyone, but this time it's different question for each of you. So I'll start again with Christina. So for Christina, based on your experience working with the US tribal nations, what are the key lessons from indigenous governance structure that could inform broader just transition strategy in many sectors? So yes, please take your time and share the stories.
I would be careful what you tell me, because if I take my time, no one else will speak. But so I think I'll start with our approach in California with government-to-government relationships is that we don't actually create policy that we don't hear from tribal nations. And so our entire approach is consultation informed. For a lot of people who are in Western governance structures, that is kind of a bit strange, even though they're in a democracy. It's hard for them to put their head around the idea that you would not have a platform before going to the people. And so what we do in California is we have ongoing consultation with all of our 109 federally recognized tribes in the state. It's a lot. It's the second largest number in the U.S. And we also have an annual summit that the governor sits down with all of the tribal leaders from all of those tribes to hear about their priorities for the year so that we can inform what our priorities should be insofar as that they're aligned with tribal nation priorities. So every year those priorities change, and every year our priorities change accordingly as well. So the second piece is that our entire approach from the state of California in our tribal engagement is based in an acknowledgement of the history of California and its treatment towards Indigenous people. Is this better? Okay. And its treatment towards Indigenous people. And so 175 years ago in September, the state of California was formed, and at the same time, gold had been discovered, and so statehood was fast-tracked, and this created, it was the one most destructive thing that happened for Indigenous people in California. Prior to the creation of statehood, prior to the discovery of gold, prior to contact, California was the largest and most diverse population of Indigenous people north of Mexico. Fast forward, we now have maybe 200,000 California Indian people that are alive today, but we still have these thriving tribes that have survived since time immemorial. So the governor, when he came into office, wanted to have an approach that really embraced this history and wanted to look at lessons from Canada, from Aotearoa, from Australia, and look at how can we both elevate this history and then create policies that are community-driven, consultation-driven, that are starting to chip away at that legacy of genocide. So he apologized, and then we created a council to inform this work. So that is my long way of getting to, it's because of that work, the ongoing consultation, and we have ongoing meetings in community about what priorities should be and what those priorities should be to address and really meet tribes where they are, Indigenous people where they are, because every individual's history is unique. My story is not the same as my cousin's story, is not the same as my grandma's story, is not the same as the tribe next door's story. And so what we've been trying to do is have flexible approaches to things like land back, so land restoration and healing that relationship of tribes with land, because we similarly have been relocated to places where we can't have sustenance practices. Healing the rivers. So one of the things that happened in the state just this last year, and you've probably heard from some of the youth who came down here, was we removed 4 kind of defunct hydroelectric dams from the largest river in America. So it's the largest river restoration in history, and it was driven by decades of tribal advocacy saying, our fish are dying, this is critical and key to our culture, and we need everyone's help to make sure that we can restore this place and restore our people. So Klamath Dam removal and river restoration. We've got the cultural burning that I mentioned, where we just dismantled laws that were passed at the creation of statehood, preventing tribes from engaging in cultural burning practices, because it was this Eurocentric idea that if you light something on fire, everyone will die. And so preventing tribes from doing that, but also creating these conditions for much larger, much more dangerous wildfire. And so over this last few years in the Newsom administration, we have he's signed laws to enable tribes to be able to do cultural burning under their own laws. And we first, in January, for the first time, Karuk tribe up north signed its own agreement with the state to be able to do that, and is the one I just mentioned earlier. And then the third thing I wanted to highlight is we're engaged in kind of these large base ocean agreements in partnership with tribes, in partnership with federal government, in partnership with science, where we're co-managing ocean spaces and protecting areas. We call them marine protected areas. And we're seeing a lot of success there, where scientists are engaging respectfully with tribes, engaging respectfully with students, engaging respectfully with everybody who views the ocean as valuable, which should be everybody. Unfortunately, is not always the case. But we're seeing these really beautiful positive outcomes that are spiritually and culturally driven by the first people of the place, where science is just there in the room to make sure that the people who need science to say that the Indigenous knowledge was right can get that checkbox. But it's been a really amazing thing to watch how people are transforming how they elevate these sacred indigenous knowledges and take a back seat and just kind of go, well, what they said. So those are some of the things that we've been doing and learning from tribes throughout the state.
Yeah, thanks, Christina. I think you raised an important point that it's not only consultation, but it's meaningful integration on the way you approach things. And really, it's you're the right holders. You know what's the best and then how it works. So it's a great example to start our second round. So now I'll pass to Francisca. So for Francisca, your community has been a leader in recognizing indigenous territorial rights and forest-based economies. How are these policies strengthening Amazonian communities? What lessons and stories that can we learn from your experience?
Então, nós temos o nosso programa de rede mais jurisdicional. Nós recebemos um aporte de recursos do Banco KfW do Reino Unido, que complementa e apoia as ações que os nossos territórios já fazem na prática. Esse trabalho acontece com os povos indígenas e as populações tradicionais, não o governo fazendo para os indígenas, mas com nós, né? Nós hoje executando a pasta, e nós estamos aqui com a nossa coordenadora do REM, KfW, que é um recurso que vem para complementar aquilo que nós já fazemos na prática, né? Que é os cuidados com os territórios, a segurança alimentar, a participação. E agora, de 2023 para cá, nós atualizamos a estratégia de repartição de benefícios. Porque antes era 12%. Hoje, com o novo estudo de estoque e fluxo, nós atualizamos, passou de 12% para 22%, que é um recurso 22% para os povos indígenas, 8% para o governo, 24% para os extrativistas e 26% para o médio, pequeno, grande porte de produção familiar. E a gente está agora, nós estamos querendo negociar os créditos de carbono de alta integridade, com transparência e com reputação. Porque se chegar a esses recursos, vai continuar implementando, é uma política pública que ela não tem fim, diferente de projetos privados que não têm dado certo hoje em muitos cantos, pelo menos nos territórios indígenas. Eu posso falar dos territórios, que em terra indígena não deu certo esses projetos. E a gente acredita que na política pública, através do rede mais jurisdicional, é possível chegar aos recursos diretos nos territórios, para a segurança alimentar, para os recursos hídricos, que é a água, para a participação das mulheres, dos jovens, para o empoderamento e principalmente o fortalecimento e a autonomia desses povos. Então, o Acre tem trabalhado dessa maneira, por isso que nós temos levado essas lições aprendidas para o mundo, que é um programa que tem dado certo, que hoje nós estamos aqui apresentando na COP as entregas.
Based in their experience and lessons learned in the past, they are investing a lot in two main solutions and sources of funds and investment. The first one is the jurisdictional RED Plus program developed by the State of Acre, and the second one is the result-based payment program, also being implemented by the State of Acre. And by these both solutions, they are planning to receive the necessary support for the strengthening of the activities inside indigenous territories. Also, in implementing the policies already established as the strengthening of the local organization, the autonomy of the communities, and what they are offering in this by these programs is to negotiate credits of high integrity, carbon credits of high integrity. So this will make it possible the necessary support for the implementation of the local plans. In addition, as part of the jurisdictional RED Plus program, they are also concluding a benefit sharing discussion with all the indigenous groups. And it was established that the indigenous will receive indigenous will receive 22% of any credit already that will be transactioned in the market.
Okay, thank you. I think we've heard a lot of COP of implementation. I think you precisely mentioned that your community has been implementing solutions and you deserve adequate support to even sustain and also do more of the good jobs that you've been working on your land and territory. So thank you. Thank you, Francisca, and we'll go to Janelle. So you did mention about the situation of your communities, and then I think a part of your point was decolonializing, climate solutions. So for you, how does your indigenous-led methods challenge or even transform the current narrative of sustainability? What's the steps necessary to really make indigenous voices becoming the part of the decision-making power?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think the fundamental problem that we're facing is just our human disconnect from nature. And folks who have been to Western Canada or have heard of Western Canada, it's world renowned for its natural beauty. And so the problem I see is that nature or the environment in Western Canada is only valuable to the colonial state if, one, there's enough natural resource to extract to make money for the state, or for two, if we're able to protect small pockets of nature that are purely for recreational or tourism resources. So that's completely contradictory to an indigenous approach where, a forest is not just the trees, but it's the bugs and the birds and the animals and even the spirits and the way they interact with the forest. So our indigenous governance system really asserts the fact that we are relatives with nature. What we do to nature, we do to ourselves, and this kind of intrinsic interdependence of nature. And I really see this practice in my community. Again, like a lot of our place names, people of the Cape, people of the water, we're the headwaters of one of the largest rivers in Canada. It's called the Flatco, or the Fraser River, colonially named. And this is where our salmon return. And salmon are a keystone species. Without salmon, our entire ecosystem would collapse. And collapse the economy that's been used for resource extraction and the tourism sector and the nature, because salmon provide all the nutrients that our ecosystem needs in Western Canada. When they die, they release those nutrients into the riverbed. The bears bring it out further into the forest. The eagles fly at hundreds of kilometers from the trees. And so salmon are really crucial and have been really under threat the last few years. And this year, we had the largest return of sockeye salmon. And it was because salmon start their life cycle 4 years as they make their journey to the ocean and back. And 4 years ago, the government of British Columbia removed some fish farms. And so we're seeing a direct impact from when these projects are removed. Nature can very quickly bounce back. And so one of the ways that we I think, assert sustainability is to really do it through our own governance and through ceremony. And so as salmon people, it's critical that we're embedding reciprocity. And so when the salmon return home, we have ceremonial practices to thank the salmon for returning home. When we eat the salmon, we return its guts and its bone into the river. And for me, that reciprocity is really about, demonstrating the fact that the salmon depend on me and I depend on the salmon. And so I think our key to conserving nature or to sustainability is to really invest in these governance systems that predate the colonial state. I mean, Canada is such a young country. We have, I have birch bark baskets older than the nation state of Canada. And so I think it's really important that people can start seeing themselves, even non-Indigenous people, to see themselves invested in these Indigenous governance systems and to learn about the way that Indigenous people show reciprocity and to build that into the solutions of the converging crises that we face.
Yeah, thank you, Janelle. I think I'm not Indigenous people, but the point you mentioned about interconnectedness, like interdependency, not only among humans but also with all the species that we've seen or we've never seen, it's really critical to build that knowledge and awareness through everyone, because that lessons, that governance structure that you've made, it really what integrate this knowledge into action, right? So thank you, Janelle. And I'm moving to Damir. So coming back to the youth, perspective and also the indigenous heritage. So how's your community in Chile, southern Chile, develop, and connect indigenous heritage to the younger generation to tackle the climate crisis we're having today? So yeah, to you, Damir.
Well, that's an interesting question. Well, so I myself, I come from this background of intergenerational justice. So as a young, I started working in young related issues regarding climate change. But when I started to learn more and I started to understand a bit more what was happening, I came to these facts, for example, that 80% of biodiversity is located in indigenous protected areas. So there is clearly something going on in these areas. And at some point, I had the chance to meet Loco Clementina, which she's my chief from this Huilliche community, Clementina Lepillo. She's the chief from Alto Fundo de Gamboa community in Castro, Chiloé. And that was the first time I had the chance to get to have a talk with an indigenous authority, and it was very incredible because most of the Mapuche chiefs, they are men. She was the first woman chief. And I was very nervous because I don't have like indigenous lineage close. I had never lived in an indigenous way. I have always grew up in the city, but I really wanted to learn and do the things differently because I understood, and that's also a critique I do to the youth. We talk a lot about intergenerationality, but we only talk it about ourselves. And I understand that because we're all immersed in this Western way of doing things. So we people from the cities, youth from the cities, we don't have elders to come to. We don't have ancient wisdom to go to learn. So I understand so much that disconnection from the land. And I asked her, like, how can we, youth and the indigenous communities, get together and collaborate because we all have the same issue, right? So Earth is screaming for help. You see it everywhere. You see it worldwide. And she was very open, and she was very open-hearted. She invited me to go to the community. She said, you want to learn? You come to my community to plant trees. And I couldn't believe. And so I organized a group of youth from my university. And we went, the first time we went 22 folks from mostly environmental area. But after the week we stayed there, and the impact we saw it had in ourselves, I said, we need to keep doing this because I found many answers to the questions I had. So for example, how can we learn? How can we learn to really relate to nature in this way you were saying? So what you do to nature, you do to yourself. So I think that's also something indigenous communities, they are always like talking about. But for us Westerners, it's very hard to understand because we have never been in that situation. We grew up in a disconnected space, and we're not going to learn through words. We're going to learn through experience, and that's what we're doing in the territories. We're bringing youth. We're going to the territory. We stay there for a week, and in that week, as we work with the earth, as we plant trees, we're also living these values which were said before, reciprocity. So, for example, whenever we were going to plant a tree, we had to do an offering. So they use murque, which is harina, how do you say, toasted harina? How do you say harina? Flour, toasted flour, thank you. So that's a way of showing respect to nature. And it was incredible because this way of recognizing nature as a subject, and not only nature, but also the spirits who live there, the ancestors of the land, the first thing we had to do when we arrived to the territory was to present ourselves, but not like, I am Damir, I am the son of my mother who comes from, I'm the father of my father who comes from. And also recognizing all the system around. So So yeah, it is a work of engaging youth in building more resilience in the socio-ecological system, because well, and it's a work of translating as well, because you cannot go to Western youth and tell them all these things because they will not understand. You have to tell them we're going to do some work to build resilience or to learn other ways of doing things. So yeah, it's been very beautiful.
Yeah. You raised interesting perspective about intergenerations, and I think a conversation between generations to really bring this common understanding, but not only a knowledge, but also practice, which require time for the younger generation to comprehend, because you're living in totally different situation and setup. So thank you for raising that, Damir. I'm passing our last one for Tubagus. You did mention that Indonesia has a huge amount of indigenous people scattered across the lands, right? And you mentioned about advocacy. So could you tell us more, like, what's your advocacy strategy? What's your experience to bring up us, lessons learned from Indonesia?
Yeah, before COVID-19, we only focus advocacy on access to territory, IPLC, indigenous people and local community. And then when COVID-19 happened, many of urban people is lost everything, lost access to job, and then labor, and then labor who have who the lost job, they can buy food. Is very horrible in Indonesia when COVID-19, and then we try to bridge between IPLC in rural and people in urban area. So we sell the food is very cheap, yeah, it's very cheap, and sometimes it's free for labor, labor, and then urban people who they can access the food and everything. And then after COVID-19, so is the key important learning for us. We doing advocacy on for a pillar, foundation pillar. The first is protection and recognition, and then governance, and then consume and production management. Currently, with the IPLC, we success to protection 1.5 million forests in Indonesia, and then 100,000 hectare. They have success for get the legalized from state. And then we success for funded the association for a community who manage the social forestry in Indonesia. And then we success for mobilize 93 community who doing livelihood, sustainably livelihood in IPLC, Indigenous people and local community. And then it's very, for us, it's very success achievement. Now we have a cafe and a restaurant. It's like etalase for indigenous people and local community. So in urban area, they can consume and buy everything commodity from many IPLC in Indonesia. This the key of after COVID-19 is the very big important for us for advocacy about indigenous peoples and local community. But still, IPLC still have a threat because they still not have law for recognition and protection in Indonesia. We waiting for 12 years until now. We still don't have law for recognition and protection indigenous people IPLC in Indonesia, because this the key how they can when this when we have a law indigenous people law, so we in IPLC have ensure where the they area, because until now they not ensure they cannot ensure that the area.
Yeah. Thank you, itu bagus. I'm also a customer in that cafe, so I do enjoy the coffee beans produced by local community and indigenous people. So it's great. But I think you raise a critical point that recognition is important, not only in the people's identity, but also the land where they live, so they can have proper, not only climate action, but also ensuring that these things, knowledge are being passed from generations to generations. So we are almost at time. We want to have a quick closing statement from each of you. I think we can go from, we'll start from maybe Janelle, you can start, and then pass it there, and then Tubagus will end it again. So yeah, please Janelle, a closing statement from your end.
Yeah, just that I'm so grateful to be part of a generation that's reclaiming our indigenous governance system, language learning. Our language is almost dying. We have about 6 fluent speakers, but a class of 60 language learners in my community. But that this many steps forward in progress to reclaim my indigenous governance system is at threat as our Canadian government electrification of and proposing false solutions to be led from indigenous people. So my message here at COP30 is that indigenous people want to lead a new economy, one that's based in their traditional economy, and that allows for innovation as leaders of clean energy, food sovereignty projects, projects that can meet their community's needs instead of scraping for crumbs of this dying oil and gas industry. So really grateful to be here to represent my nation and to bring attention to some of the issues that we face in Canada.
I think my closing remark would be that for subnational governments and national governments and everything in between who are struggling to find ways to advance indigenous solutions in partnership with tribes, you kind of just have to start, and you have to be willing to make mistakes and to know that not everything's going to be perfect. A lot of the programs I talked about today are the result of trying new things, trying to indigenize programs that already exist. So for example, a lot of our land back work in California that is state partnership is funded by our 30 by 30 programs and tribal nature-based solutions programs. So we have $107 million that was invested by the governor. I talked about it in Dubai. That was before it actually went out, and now it's gone out, and we're seeing these beautiful land returns, historic land returns for the first time since the state was created. And they've got conditions on them. That's just kind of how the money flows. But I think for us, it's like, do you do nothing and just let the status quo persist? Or do you try solutions that might not be the best and might not be the goal where you want to get, but you start kind of chipping away at the idea that land needs to be retained by the colonized state, and that land is some sort of thing that needs to be commodified versus creating these pathways to restoration of these long-term relationships with land, with animals, with the waters. And so I think that's my closing statement, is that it's not perfect working from inside a Western state, but there are ways to push out as Indigenous advocates push in, so that we can meet each other, even if it's not right now, maybe in 5 years, 10 years, get to the point where we are at that perfect solution, and where we have gotten to the point in these policy cycles where people are comfortable just saying, yeah, let's just have everybody manage their land like they did forever before we messed it all up. So that's, I think, my closing statement.
Thank you. Then we can have Francisca.
Eu só queria agradecer a participação, né? Eu acho que nessa COP nós traz as vozes dos povos indígenas com muita força aqui no Brasil, em Belém. Nós temos para mais de 5 mil indígenas, 3 mil indígenas por aí. Porque a resposta somos nós, e não só os povos indígenas, mas os parceiros, os doadores, as instituições parceiras, porque a gente não faz nada só. Então, é muito importante que nesses espaços nós traga a nossa voz, nós mesmos falando por nós, e espero que daqui saia grande resultado para que venha ser para o melhor para os povos indígenas, para a humanidade, para o clima e para o planeta.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting here to this panel. It is important that for this COP there are a lot of indigenous people. We have more than 5,000 indigenous participating. And the answer could be built and developed with us, and we are part of the solution. In this line, it's also important to work together. Nobody can do and achieve good outputs alone, so it's important to work together, governments, indigenous people, partners, etc., etc. And for this COP, we hope that this COP will achieve great results, great outputs that could facilitate and make it possible the achievement of the global climate emissions reduction goals.
Okay, we'll get to the mayor.
Thank you. So I think my call would be a call for inter-epistemological justice. I think that's a concept we have not been hearing. I myself believe we're not really going to get nowhere if we keep doing the same things in the same way from the system which created the problems. So as long as we're not including into the dialogue all the perspectives from the pluriverse that exists in the real world, I don't think we're going to make a real change. So and also in that way there is a need for education. So education not only for youth but for everybody to relate to nature in these other ways, to understand nature in these other epistemologies, which actually are the ones who have kept nature healthy, right? Resilient. So yes, that's my invitation to everybody here. So educate the ones who do not know, as I didn't knew before. Now I know. But there's that work needed to be done. First, I think it's a self-reflection of wanting to understand really what is going on. And second, also a willingness to educate.
And thank you for educating me. I know more as this panel today. Itu bagus.
Yeah, for saving forests and essential ecosystem, coastal and Smile Island as well, it's important for put the IPLC as primary actor. That the key based on our learning in Indonesia. While my organization is 50 years, was 50 years in Indonesia, because unfortunately Indonesia IPLC still very independently for safe from ecological disaster and climate crisis, because in COP30 we have different way how to talk about saving the forest and essential ecosystem in Indonesia. So it's also important for try to developing interdiscipline about climate for climate issues. Is very important based on our learning. Thank you.
Thank you. Give a round of applause for every panel here, everyone. Thank you so much for your learnings, and I'll pass it back to Ignacio.
So before we go, thank you, Yobel, for your improvised moderation. It was fantastic, right? The last minute. But before, can you hear me there? Okay. Before we go, we need to acknowledge that we're standing on Mairi, which is the name given by the Tupinamba and the Pacaya nations originally to this region. I failed to mention that at the beginning, so I apologize on that, and I apologize by butchering those names. So thank you again for the panelists. Yobel, which you can see his name now correctly spelled there. And please keep checking our calendar for upcoming events and upcoming events of these panels who are going to be in the COP for the remaining days. Thank you very much.